If you have an author website or you're thinking about making your first author website, you might be wondering what are the strategies that are going to make it effective for your viewer or whoever lands on your site versus what are the things that you want to avoid so that they don't just like run away within 5 or 10 seconds of landing there. So today on our stream with here with the verses, we're also going to be joined by Kiss Poetry, Billy, who's down in Atlanta, who's been building on the side, but for some time now, since 2005, building author websites and things like that. So lots of insights that I think you're going to be able to take and apply to your own site. Please give a nice, warm welcome to Billy. What's up, Billy?
Hello. Hey, good to be here.
Cool. Billy, again, can you just give us a quick reminder? What is Kiss Poetry about before we dive into all this fun stuff about author sites?
Yeah, so Kiss Poetry is another online poetry community. I say that because I know there's several, but the focus is on minimalism. I think you might notice that when you go to the site. Um, so I just wanted to design it to be minimal and focus on promoting poets.
Let's go. I think these
Yeah.
are all great things to be doing, especially in 2024, because there's so many
All right.
poets. It's a great time to be pushing your own poetry, but also I think being able to uplift other voices. I find that that's something that I am much more interested in nowadays. And I
Yeah,
think websites and platforms, yeah.
that's what gets me going more so than posting my own poetry. I do,
Hmm.
but just knowing that I'm helping other people, that's where it's
Got
at.
you. Cool. All right, Billy, if you can share your screen with me, I know you have a bunch of tips that you're going to be running through that are going to be really helpful for people to be considering. Also, for everyone who's posted on Threads, so something that we did was we also asked for that's right, your thoughts on what you think is going to be helpful for a poetry website. So we're going to be looking at insights related to that um, towards the end of the stream. All right, let's take a look and see what we have here. All right. Billy, take us away.
All right, so there's a few points that I want to make sure we go over for y'all. The first is using my kind of what I go by for the website, Kiss Poetry, using that acronym. So KISS is a pretty old acronym from back in the old before social media forum days. It stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid, or if you want it to be nicer, it stands for Keep It Super Simple. So keep it simple, keep it minimal. I think I think that's important for a lot of different kinds of websites. Um, you don't want to overwhelm the person. You want to keep things simple and clean, but especially for author websites where obviously the focus is on writing. Um, I think it's really important to keep it kind of minimal, simple, and clean. Um, so I'm just showing a quick example here. Not much here. Just we got a poem title and the poetry. Very minimal, um, very clean. The main page here, nothing but your name or the site title. Really easy to find out about you. Really easy to find something like a bio. Just right there, and then you have your poems, or maybe you have a button to your poetry book. So, and this is an extreme example, though. This is extremely minimal. You can go a little bit more robust than this, but this is definitely you might want to go this minimal. This is definitely a route you might want to take. Or this here is a little bit more visually appealing, but I would also consider this to be minimal. You have the fancy background. You can maybe get, if you're a graphic designer, you could design a background that has to do with your poetry, or maybe get a friend to design a background for you and find a website theme like this where but it's visually appealing but still minimal, has your maybe your name, um, a link to your bio, a link to writing tips, a link to your latest book. Just very simple, clean and minimal. That's my MO, if you will, when I'm building a website. So the first thing I think about is I want to try to keep this clutter free.
Mhm. When you're talking about also just kind of looking at some of those examples you put, so a lot of times you can expect to see like the menu, typically up at the top, um, like a banner. How many items do you think is like the best amount, or would you kind of recommend for someone
Hmm.
getting started?
That's that's hard to say. I wouldn't want there to be so many to where you have to like scroll in the menu if possible.
Mm,
So, but maybe if I'm thinking about an author site, you want your about page, contact, maybe a link to where they can buy your books, and a link to your blog. So maybe somewhere between 4 and 8
mm.
um, would be
I
good.
would say, I would say too, just from having encountered this with the Versa, but for my main business site, one of the things is if you have too many things in your menu, depending on what platform you're using, they'll switch over to like a more thing. So it's like you have to scroll into the more, and then like it will like drop down, and then you can choose the other things. I would say try to
Yeah,
limit
it
it.
gets.
What's like every additional click just adds so much friction. Like every time
Yep.
someone has to click, that's like a chance for someone to kind of click away from your site. And obviously, your goal is to try to keep them there as long as possible.
It's
So
hard enough to get them. It's hard enough to get them there in the first place. So
facts.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or the menu, if you have too many things, the menu could end up like glitching depending on the browser you're using. Each browser is a little different. I've had really complex menus where it looks okay in Chrome, but then you go to Firefox and it's all glitchy because it's just way too much.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. That's interesting you bring that up too, because I know sometimes, especially nowadays, a lot of sites will allow you on like the background and things like that to use like movies or clips of things like that. So there's a lot of motion. Um, One
yeah,
thing that Google can rank for, because if you have a writer site, you might be whatever your focus is for your author website, you might be trying to also rank on Google. One category that also ranks for is speed,
right.
and if your website takes too long to load, that can actually work to your detriment. So just paying attention to how fast your website's able to load on different devices, even.
And that's exactly another reason why I always go straight for minimalism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I one of my pet peeves is a slow website, so I always
Mm-hmm.
want it to load almost instantly. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if you have a minimal site that's mostly text, still maybe with some multimedia here and there, but if it's mostly text, obviously it's gonna load really fast. You're gonna have a
Mm-hmm.
high Google rank. So
Got you.
um, yeah. The options that I was going to go ahead and recommend, um, uh, they're not a sponsor or anything, but obviously I have up right now WordPress.com. WordPress is a platform that I've always loved. It's what I started out using way back in the day. Um, so whether you have no money to spend, you can create an author site absolutely free at WordPress.com. Of course, if you want to get a little fancy and self-host it, you can do that too. Um, but it's just nice because they have all kinds of free themes. They give you a lot of stuff for free. So if you're not looking to spend any money, it's a good option, I think.
Mm. Billy, do you happen to have like an affiliate link for WordPress or no?
I don't. I don't.
Okay. In the
Um,
future, if you get one, please let us know so we can attach it.
yeah.
How much coding? I know, for instance, my wife, I think one of her first websites was on WordPress,
Okay.
and some of the things that she was running into involved. How much coding do you feel like you need to know in order to really maximize your use of WordPress?
These days, well, it depends on how complex your site's going to be, but I think
For sure.
these days, none. If you are sticking with an author site where you're just going to have like a button to your book, a button to contact you, a button to your blog post, if you're going to
Mhm.
keep it simple. Um, you really don't need any coding experience. They have this new site editor that I'll try to boot up here. Um,
Mhm.
So the original WordPress didn't have anything fancy like this, but they now have
Mhm.
this site editor where you can easily move parts of the site around, drag and drop things. Um, so it gets pretty easy. You just point click. If I want to add like a contact page here, I could do that. Maybe. Of course, it gives me trouble, and obviously that doesn't look good. But the point is, yeah, it's pretty. You really don't need any coding experience with their new setup.
If you're going for like a really basic setup, if like maybe a landing page, your home page, um, an about page, maybe a recent publication page, and a contact page, just something really basic like that. How long would you plan or kind of budget out for? Do you think for someone who's a complete beginner to make their site?
How long would it take for them to make it? Well, it could anywhere from a day to a week. Again, depending on how complex they're doing it. But if we're talking a personal author site, and if you are going to keep it really minimal with mostly just text, they have this set up to where you could probably get a decent looking site going overnight,
Hmm.
depending. Now, if you have zero experience with page builders and stuff, I'm sure
Hmm.
more like a few days or something. But they have it set up now to where it's going to be pretty quick, especially because you can find a theme um, that already has the buttons, so
Hmm.
even some graphics. Um, so yeah, you can get it done pretty quick. Now, if you have zero experience and you just don't want to get frustrated, you don't want to mess around with the page builder here or anything, you could probably find a developer, WordPress developer, relatively cheap. Um, but then we start getting into, is that worth it? Um,
Mm.
do you need the website? Or another thing I was going to recommend to folks is you could just do something as a link tree site, just a one page site with a button to your, again, to your books, a button to your bio, a button to contact you, maybe a button to your threads or
Hmm.
whatever social media you use. So
Hmm.
it comes down to how fancy do you want to get? Um, who's your audience? Like if you're a famous publisher and you have a huge following, then probably they're going to have a full blown website, probably pay a developer and all that. But if you're just especially if you're a beginner and you're just
Hmm.
writing poetry for fun, you might not need a full blown website. Just do like a link tree and focus on
Hmm.
promoting your stuff on social media.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so the next thing I was going to talk about is it's related to keeping it simple, but just uh, typography in general. Typography, font, obviously for a writing site, that's going to be really important. You can spend this alone. We were talking about how long might this take. I mean, depending on how OCD you are, just simply picking the font could take hours, days. I will
Hmm.
sometimes sit when I'm sitting down to build a website. I will sit and go through it feels like 50, 100 different fonts trying to figure out, what looks best here. Um, and sometimes it just comes down to I kind of just whatever I'm drawn to in the moment. Like I might narrow it down to a couple fonts or 3 fonts, and then I
Mhm.
just say, that's the one. That's the one that's speaking to me right now. And I think it looks good in this site. So that's what I'm going to go with. But it is really, the font is right up there with keeping it simple, because obviously when somebody visits your site, the first thing they're going to see is the font, and if it's hard to read, or if they just don't like the font, um, they might bounce. So
Mhm.
font is very important. Are you going to pick a serif font? So do you want your font to look like a classic book font, or do you want something more modern, like that's being shown here, a sans serif like Helvetica or something like that? A lot of it's personal preference, but you do, at least you want it to be easy to read.
I think just to kind of piggyback on that point a little bit, I think sometimes people get a little bit lost in terms of just like design basics. I'm not a designer, but just some general principles you want to be thinking about. Um, Not too many colors. A lot of times people will recommend 2 or 3 fonts for the website. A lot of times people recommend like 2 or 3 colors maximum.
Yeah,
Um, Please, please, please pay attention to legibility. Like a neon dark
right.
blue font color on a black background is not going to be legible. Red text
Yeah,
on a black background or most other colors is not. Red text in general is just really hard to make work. Um,
yeah.
High contrast um, is always going to be your friend. So trying to make sure there's again even like taking a few steps away from your screen and kind of looking at it, like, can I read this from a distance? Is this still legible, or is this something
Hmm.
I'm having a hard time? Because if you're going to have a hard time reading it, kind of, someone else is definitely going to have a hard time. We're also entering an age, what's up to Joshua checking in, where people are paying more and more attention to disabilities. People are paying more attention to like people with like visual
Accessibility.
impairments. Yeah,
Yep.
accessibility is a huge thing. This also comes down to like
Hmm.
font sizes. This also comes down to maybe, for instance, you're getting fancy with your website. You include like a light box or something that pops up. How do you close it? You know, even just paying attention, because
Yeah.
sometimes people get confused. Like sometimes there'll be an X, but then there'll also be like a button that says close, and then people are like, well, which do I press? Is it both? Is it one? Is it like people even just thinking about like the commands you're giving on your site? You know, like
Hmm.
accessibility is a huge factor. Um, if
That's why
worst
so
comes to
many.
worst, go on.
I was just gonna say that's why some people just throw their hands up and they're like, I'm just gonna hire somebody.
Yeah, 100%, hundred
Because
percent.
there's a
I mean,
lot. There's a lot to think about.
it can be. It's a whole other world.
Yeah.
So worst comes to worst, high contrast, black and white works. Black and white
Yep.
works. You know, so if you have doubts about something, playing it safe, I think is always probably the easiest choice to make, and people will probably thank you for that. In all
Yeah.
honesty. Speaking of black and white, look at this. This is like, look,
Yeah.
it's super legible. It's great.
Yeah.
It's good.
Very, very
Yeah.
simple. Loads
Yeah.
fast. That's what I went
Mhm.
with there.
Mhm.
Um, so, uh,
Other key
what
tips that you
else?
think are going to be important for people to consider? Do you think for their author websites before we look at some tips from other people as well?
Um, I will say it is. Don't get too caught up on it, because I keep saying to keep it simple and minimalism, and I'm showing you these really minimal web pages. But you don't have to get get too caught up on that. It is okay to have like some YouTube video or other
Mhm.
multimedia aspects. And I would say actually do that if you can, if you feel comfortable like reciting your poetry. I think that's really cool if you have a
Mm.
your author site where people can
Mhm.
click and see you reading your poetry. If you're not comfortable, on camera, you could just record and have audio recording of yourself. Or a final option, if you're not comfortable with any of that, um, I think a cool idea might be to, because you could find somebody pretty cheap, pay somebody to do some voiceover, pay somebody to read your poetry, basically,
Mm.
and then you could have that up on your site. Just some sort of something other than just text, even though that's okay. But you might get a little bit more. They might stay longer on your site
Hmm.
if you're able to add something a little more interactive and multimedia.
That's interesting you say that too, because you mentioned like YouTube videos and things like that. I would say if you're able to embed some, or not even embed, if you're actually able to put the video right onto your website instead of just embedding a link to a YouTube video,
Mm,
that's another thing that can work to your advantage. For instance, like Google searches and things like that. Because like one way that you can make, like if you have two websites, they're almost identical, like almost identical names, same sort of poetry and things like that. But one website also has like some actual videos uploaded onto the website. Um, Google can also like search through that sort of content as well nowadays.
yeah,
I mean, this stuff's
yeah,
advancing so fast. This stuff wasn't even possible a couple years ago. Um, and so, because you have native content on your own website versus another site that doesn't, you can actually start to draw a little bit more traffic over to you. So especially like if you're
yep,
like writing help essays, craft essays, or things like that. So like maybe you want to upload one of those directly to your website. If you're doing a free plan on a lot of these websites like Wix, or I don't know what for WordPress or like Squarespace, something like that. I don't know what the limit is, so you want to check that. Video files are huge. Video files are very, very big. Um, so just kind of something to watch out for. But hey, maybe you could put a couple videos this on your website, um, just to kind of get that sort of content going. Um, there was one other thing I was going to say. I would say also trying to narrow your writing down by location. Because if you're just like, oh, poet website, you're going to get buried. I mean, there's a million poet websites. So it's the more if you're like, oh, I'm the poet from like San Marcos in Texas or whatever. Now these are things that can start to kind of narrow you down and make you a little bit easier to find.
yeah,
Like if you
absolutely.
want to be found, you have to be findable. You know. So those are just some other quick little things to consider um, for your author website.
I think that the last thing I would say, and I think I touched on it, but I get frustrated or annoyed when I go to a website and I just simply cannot find, like, how do I contact this person,
Mm, mm-hmm,
or how do I learn about this person? So I would say bio/about page and a way to contact you. Like, definitely keep that front of mind, and have it
mm-hmm,
to where you can't miss it when they come to read your book or poetry. They can quickly see your bio, they can quickly contact you if they need to.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What would you say is kind of the difference between, and also just to speak to your point, I know like there's no reason nowadays you can't make like a contact thing also as the footer for every page. At the bottom of every page, making it easy for people to just send you an email or something like that.
Yeah,
There's there's no reason
it's
not to
usually
be able to do
built
that.
into these
Yeah,
these
yeah,
platforms. Yeah.
yeah, because they expect it, right? Um,
Mhm.
do you think that looking forward, like 2025, 2026, just with like social media sites being what they are, do you think that the role of an author website is diminishing at all, or do you think it's always going to have a place?
Well, then I get into it. Do I really think this, or is this just my hope? But
Mm,
my hope is that it's not. Um, I'm always looking for like a resurgence in the personal blog and the
mm,
personal website, because yeah, since social media came along, um, I do feel like an author website or a personal blog, whatever you want to call it, it does feel like it's gotten less popular. Most people, I think, are just they have their social media accounts and that's it. But I just I think that's like just boring, and you're not able to really show your creativity. Um,
Mm,
so I hope it's not. I hope there's a more and more of a resurgence of folks being like, yeah, I've got my threads and my X and whatever other social media, but I've got my personal site where I can really
right.
show my personality. Um, that's my hope. I don't
Mm.
know if that's reality or not.
I mean, I do think it's dangerous to just have your stuff on social media sites. Um, if I mean, the easiest example to probably pick out right now is TikTok. If TikTok gets banned, all those
Yeah.
people that build up their entire livelihoods on TikTok, it's gonna be if it does get banned, it's gone. All that
Yep.
you put in is gone. Whereas your own website, that's where you have complete control, a hundred
Or
percent.
you hear stories all the time where somebody's built up a million followers, but
Mm-hmm.
for some strange reason they get banned,
Right.
or yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
they're done.
Yeah. I mean,
so
you
so
literally have no control over that. Yeah.
so that is
Yeah.
that's another reason that hopefully more and more people go back to just having a personal website, even if it's not an author site.
Mm-hmm.
Have a personal website where you blog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a thing out called the Fediverse. We can go all kinds of
Why do I
different
keep
directions
hearing
here.
about it? Like in the last day, I've heard about the Fediverse like 10 times. I'm like, what? I've
Yeah,
never heard of this, but now I gotta do
it's
more
well. Do
research.
you remember? Uh, well, it's still RSS feeds are still around. I was about to say, do you remember RSS feeds? Um, but
Yeah.
it's I kind of think of it like that because when RSS feeds were really big, you could subscribe to another website.
Right.
Fediverse is kind of like that, where as long as you have a site that's compatible with it, it all feeds together.
Is this
Um,
like Threads and like Mastodon will be able to like share? Is that what I'm
yeah,
thinking? Okay. Okay. This
right.
is.
So if you post on Threads, if they get it right, if you post on Threads, it'll show up on Mastodon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just syndication.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's
Cool.
but it's pretty cool.
Billy, I do want to before we head out because I know we've been talking about a lot of stuff. I want to run through some things that people sent us to just kind of get your quick reactions to some of the tips that they have. Give me one
All right.
minute to load this up. All right, so let's see. These are going to be. I don't check threads for a day and then I get swapped. Okay, so I asked other people. So, what are your tips for author websites? Okay, just want to highlight some people, some quick things. Creative Writing Wizard says define what you want to accomplish before building it.
Mm,
I think like
yeah.
intentionality for everything is an underutilized step. I think people are often reacting instead of acting without really kind
That's
of
true.
having a strategy. So I really like the intentionality. Um, be authentic. That I don't know if you ever have you heard of like Seth Godin before? He's like a marketer. You could say no. It's fine.
Mm-mm. No.
Um, he really gets into this debate that I think is really interesting about authenticity versus consistency. Um, the quick example he would give is that, like, for instance, you don't really want people to be authentic. Like, if your surgeon's going through a divorce and has a bunch of like family difficulties, you don't want them to walk into the operating room being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so upset about this." All right, let's operate you. It's not what you want. You want
Yeah.
consistency. You want him to
Right.
be the best surgeon that he can be. Um, value propositions, figuring out the type of site you want. I think
Yeah.
that's a whole other debate in terms of author websites versus potentially approaching more as a platform. And then have fun, enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
It's fair.
That's very important. You could even going up to the
I'm
first
gonna keep
point
scrolling.
there.
Yeah.
You could even just draw.
Mhm.
A lot of people literally draw their website, map it out
Mhm.
first before you even
Mhm.
start with anything.
Mhm.
Yep.
11, she said 1111 shows show your vibe. Feedback and reviews. I like this. So they're giving some ideas, types of content that you can put on the site to kind of start separate
Hmm.
yourself. So it's not just your writing. So reviews, audiobooks, samples, a full bio, okay,
Show your
character
vibe.
write
That's why
ups.
I hope personal sites are not going away because you got to show your vibe.
Mm-hmm. Don't go with what you think's maybe the best layout. This is from Labella Journeys. Hire someone. Don't be opposed. I do think writers are afraid to put the investment into themselves, like
Mm,
afraid to kind of pay for some things. I think
true.
I think that fiction writers maybe are a little bit more open to it because there's this assumption that you'll need an editor. I think with fiction, but I think a lot of times with poets, the idea of paying like $100 or $200 or more for a service is like, well, I don't know. Like I see a lot of hesitation about that. Um, whereas these really are investments for you're investing in yourself. You know. Um,
Yeah.
LaBelle also gives some examples of some dated sites. I think of like, what was it like Angel Fire or like GeoCities?
GeoCities, yes. That's what I was thinking about when you were mentioning the bright colors and that. I was
Oh
thinking
yeah,
GeoCities, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's
hundred
yep.
percent. I made like 100 GeoCities websites. It was so easy to do. Like you just and then like to animate a little thing. They weren't even really GIFs. They were just anyways.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Again, going simple, but I
Hmm.
also like that. Bella also mentions like thinking about the intentionality in terms of like the aesthetics. So maybe if you're going for a certain
Mm,
vibe, doing it to match. Okay. Um,
yeah. I do like retro. I like I
Cam
saw a
Hart
theme.
artist. Oh, Cam Hart. Cam artist. Cam. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about the retro. Yeah, tell me more about the
Oh
retro.
yeah, I saw a theme the other day where it just looked like a terminal or console, like just really old
Mm,
school computer font, and that I was like, oh, that's
mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see Garage Poets also saying that they hate paying for anything. I think, yeah, we just have like a
You
negative relationship with money.
you can
We
do a
live in a
lot for
world of
free.
abundance. You can also do a lot for free, but I think we have to be willing to invest in ourselves. Um, the Favicon, which we did not touch on today. The
Mm,
Favicon, for those who don't know, is that little,
yeah.
like you can see it at the top, like up here. There's your little, it's that little icon, my Bob. Okay. Don't forget about the I don't even.
Yeah.
You have to look into whatever website platform is where to put your Favicon, but don't forget about that. Okay.
Yeah, the big platforms usually have a spot where you just upload an image and it does it. If you're building from scratch, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I would imagine. Also give some design tips. 2 fonts, one for the title, one for the copy. Just to keep things
Hmm.
clean and simple. Um,
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah. Don't try and do like 5 different fonts.
mhm. Please don't. Yeah, please, please don't. And again, they also mentioned the video thing, which we talked about earlier as well. Um, Also, if you find us on Threads, you can see the example from Catherine Holton's site. Um, there also gives some suggestions on minimum pages, which I think we kind of talked about already, but home, about, publications, your books, and your contact page. Um,
Hmm.
have a site to reference. That's a good one. Always have a model. Always have a model site. Find one author. Find 2 poets, 3 poets who are kind of doing something like, oh, I like the aesthetic. I want this. Um,
Yep.
all right.
And the AI is getting so good that soon you're going to be able to take one of those poets' websites and say, "Hey, just make a site like that."
You probably already can.
Right.
There's already,
Yeah,
I
you
forget, I
probably
think
already
it's
can.
Wix. I think Wix has
Yeah.
like and I imagine other ones have it as well. That's I do just that's probably one final point I would say is that and you can tell me what your own thoughts are because I see you have a platform. I have a platform. I don't. Did you ever have your own poet website like for Billy?
I have a personal blog where
Okay,
I sometimes post a
okay, but not
poem, but
okay.
not just dedicated to poetry. No.
Got you. Okay, because I used to have just a poet website just for me, just for Jeff Anderson. And I was like,
Hmm.
like I think
Bring it back, Jeff.
I mean maybe, but at the same time I don't. Yeah, people search for you, but at the same time, one of the reasons I switched over to Diverses, among other things, is like I don't want it to just be me. What I'm building is bigger
Hmm.
than me. Um, like I want to make something that eventually is going to be in a position where it can also hire people. Be kind of in
Yeah.
like to provide all kinds of different services and things like that. And it's like, oh, Jeff Anderson, you go like to jeffanderson.com, but which is actually a clothing company, by the way. Don't go to
Oh,
jeffanderson.com. That name was already taken. But like
it gets
if it's
boring
jeffanderson.com,
too.
but then you work, yeah, it's that. It's I don't know, like if people a lot of times, yeah, people will search for you, but at the same time, if I'm providing a lot more services and things like that to help writers, then the more I'm able to offer, the more traffic I can bring to a website. You know what I mean? Whereas like if it's just me,
Yeah,
I just don't.
that makes sense.
I don't know. That's one of the reasons why I thought platform. I think like personal doing like personal branding and things like that. I think is helpful, but um, I'm curious to see. I've already. I mean, I'll put it like this: we haven't had like Diverses poetry.com for like a super long time, but we've already gotten way more hits just based on what we're doing than what I got for my own website, which was up for way longer. You know, um,
I
so I
think
think
oh,
that's kind of something else to
yeah,
consider.
people appreciate the help. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And it's you provide more resources. So I think going back to your asking yourself like when you're making the website, what's the goal of the website, and why would people go to your website? Like, why would people go to you? Like, why would people go to your website? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of people don't necessarily have super strong motivation to go to most author websites. So what are you doing that's kind of separating you and making what you're doing so special? That's like, no, I have to go there because that's the place where I get this, and I can't get this anywhere else.
Maybe it's a
What's
newsletter.
separating you? Could be a
I don't
newsletter.
know.
It could be a newsletter. Could be some sort of community you've created. Could be
Hmm.
um, some sort of resource you've created that people find really useful. Whatever it is, I mean, that's what you have to find out. But that goes back to the intentionality. Like, why are you creating your website to begin with? Um, Especially if you're paying money for it. If you're paying $100, $200 or more, because $100, $200, let's be honest, for a website creation, that's pretty cheap.
Very.
Um, like companies
Yep.
are spending tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars on websites. Like you dropping $100 on your website is like, come
Hmm.
on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
They'll spend 10
but
grand just on the logo or something.
just
Yeah.
facts, if not more.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like imagine if Nike woke up tomorrow and they're like, I want to change my logo. You know how much money they'd have to spend? You know
Yeah.
how many like millions of dollars
Millions.
they'd have to spend?
Yep.
It's like, at least, if not $1 billion. But I think really to get the investment back, you really have to be thinking about how am I getting people here.
Hmm. Brand.
Didn't mean to
We're
interrupt you,
talking
but
about
yeah,
Nike and logos. I wouldn't what am I trying to say? Uh, I don't think it's a bad idea to even come up with a logo for yourself.
no,
So, and
th-
yeah, make a whole brand, a whole community at your author site,
it's
if
is
possible.
yeah. And these things take time. I think a lot of times we're thinking about like the 1 year plan as opposed to like the 5 year, 10 year plan. But everything builds if you want it to. It doesn't have to, but everything builds. Um, Billy, any final comments and things like that before we let you go? I know it's late. I know you got kids, family, and stuff like that.
Um, well, if anybody needs help starting a website, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Threads. I am Kiss Poetry. You can find me at kisspoetry.com. Like I said, I've built websites as a hobby since 2005. So if you need any help, reach out. Um, but it's also it is pretty easy these days with the page builders and stuff that they give you. So, But that's it. I wish you all the best of luck building your author sites. And thanks, Jeff, for having me.
So, Billy, thank you so much for being with us. Hang around for a minute while I close this out.
Sure.
So, everyone, if you have other questions again about author websites, again, you can find Billy at kisspoetry.com. You can find me at theversuspoetry.com, or also both of us on Threads as well. We will leave you tomorrow night. We'll be back with Fine Print. We're taking a look at another poem that you sent us and analyzing it right around 9 p.m. New York. Beyond that, we will see you all later. Have a good day. Have a good night. Good afternoon. Thanks for your time. Thanks to Joshua. Thanks to Garage Poets hanging out with us, and you for watching as well. Take care, guys.